with these secret drone fleets and, coming through Azerbaijani airspace to attack the undefended rear of Tehran and, Parchan and all that defense industry that exists there to the, the southeast of Tehran. That were causing Israel great pain. The Israelis are starting to come out and sort of admit that there were more targets hit than they're admitting, and it did cause them a lot of concern. And the senior leadership was telling Netanyahu, if we continue, they're really, really, really going to mess us up. And they're doing that. But Iran didn't deploy all of their systems. And what was happening at the end of the war is Iran would start to introduce a new system that just cut through their defenses like a hot knife through butter. Bam, took down a building. The Israelis don't know anything about these. They don't have enough data issues, the whole thing. But he said, the 12-day war, he said, there's no more fractures. He said, Iran has come together like it's never come together before. People were trying to take advantages of differences of opinion between the government and the supreme leader on a number of fronts. So either he goes into exile, and maybe that's why his son's spending so much time in Miami.
Netna had an interview yesterday or the day before. He said that Iran has increased the range of missiles to 8,000 kilometers. They want to hit New York, Mar-a-Lago, and they want to kill, is what's going on. Scott, when you look at this situation in the Middle East, what is your understanding, your take on that? Look at the Iranian president himself has said that he believes that Israel is going to strike again and that Iran is prepared for this. I don't share that conclusion if for no other reason is that you have to ask yourself, remind yourself that Israel is the one that picked up the phone and begged Donald Trump for this ceasefire at the end of 12-day war. Now, Iran was glad enough to have it because, they were subjected to a Pearl Harbor type event that took out their senior military leadership and, the Israelis pulled all the tricks out of the bag with these secret drone fleets and, coming through Azerbaijani airspace to attack the undefended rear of Tehran and, Parton and all that defense industry that exists there to the southeast of Tehran. All of this was hit by the Israelis to great effect. I mean, Iran got hit hard. There's no doubt about it. But Iran recovered, and by the end of the war, the Israeli aircraft, the Iranians have published some interesting interviews with their pilots. Wait a minute, Iran still has pilots. I thought the Israelis took out the entire Iranian Air Force, because where was the Iranian Air Force during this 12-day war doing their job? Apparently, the Iranian Air Force, including those old F-14 seconds and some old F-4S, were locking in on the Israeli aircraft as they were doing their attack run, because the Israelis were using primarily these Blue Streak air-launched missiles. But to do that, you've got to basically fly an attack route. And as they were doing that before weapons release, the Iranian Air Force would lock on, causing the Israelis to break the attack. Now, they weren't getting shot down, but they weren't able to complete their mission. And the Iranians were disrupting the Israeli attacks. It wasn't as one-sided as everybody makes it out to be. And what we do know, too, is that the Iranians had overcome the Israeli ballistic missile defense shield. By the end of the war, the Iranians were hitting targets that were causing Israel great pain. The Israelis are starting to come out and sort of admit that there were more targets hit than they're admitting. And it did cause them a lot of concern. And the senior leadership was telling Netanyahu, if we continue, they're really, really, really going to mess us up. Really going to mess us up. We have to stop this war now. We have lost control of the outcome. So now we come to the present. What has changed? Has Israel's ballistic missile defense shield changed? One of the things that there's a very interesting book written by a British technical intelligence guy about World War II. And I just had the name of the book on the tip of my tongue. Warren's Secret, A Secret War, something of that nature. But it's about the technical intelligence But basically, each side investigates the capabilities, the other reverses engineers things, and then comes up, that's how we got radar, German radar, British radar. That's how things happen. And I was introduced to this book by Israeli technical intelligence officers who were working during the Gulf War. And basically, the Iraqis were firing in their Al Hussein missiles. And then later on, they threw in the short Alusin, which is a different variation in the Alai, how Al-Ajara, and each one had different aspects to it, to mating rings, different configurations and all that. And the Israelis would take these debris and put it in this consolidated area they end up calling the Scud Museum. And I got to go to the Scud Museum and see it, and I talked to the Israelis that did that. But the point is, they studied every aspect of the Iranian Scud, looking for vulnerabilities, looking for differences, to try and understand what was going on. There can be no doubt in my mind that the Israelis did the same thing as a result of this most recent, the 12-day war. But what did they learn? You see, the Iranians started the conflict by firing their 20 and 30-year-old missiles, just drowning out the system, overwhelming the system. But these were capabilities already known to the Israelis, because there was True Promise 1 and True Promise 2, that the Israelis collected the debris from. So, they were familiar, but near the end of the war, Iran started deploying different missiles, either older missiles with new warhead configurations or newer hypersonic missiles. And these were having great effect. But the Israelis, of course, will be looking at the radar data, the telemetry data, Mazent, all the different clues they can come in, including the physical debris on the ground. And they're doing that. But Iran didn't deploy all of their systems. And what was happening at the end of the war is Iran would start to introduce a new system that just cut through their defenses like a hot knife through butter. Bam. Took down a building. The Israelis don't know anything about these. They don't have enough data. They don't have a solution. And Iran has been building newer and newer and newer missiles. I'll let you on to, I can't call it a secret because the Iranians don't tell me anything. But my assessment is that because why doesn't Russia sell the Iranians the Arak missile? If the Russians are really good friends of Iran, they give Iran the Arak missiles, and the Iranians are going, we got it. We don't call it a Rashnik, but it does the same thing. They got it. And there's nothing to do about. So when you look at this, Israel can't defend itself any better than what it did, and that wasn't good enough. And that's why the Iranian president, when he spoke to journalists last week, I guess in New York, I had the honor privilege of being there to listen to him and ask some questions. He was confident. I didn't see a scared man. I didn't see a worried man. I saw a man who was serious, very serious, and very confident in the strength of his nation and the strength of his government. He said they could try decapitation if they wanted to. He said, there's 6 of me. He said, you kill me, we've got one already picked. You kill him, we've got one already picked. We go down 6 layers. You can't kill us all, and we're all on the same side. That was the one message that came across, because one of the things that appeared to be that the West and Israel have been trying to do is fracture Iran, get Iran to break up into constituent parts based upon ethnicities, etc., to break the Kurds away, to break the Arabs away, the Baluch, etc., even to fracture the Persians among tribal lines or economic lines. And the Iranian president said that there were some serious fractures in Iran. He said we made some mistakes. I mean, he talked about women like I've never heard an Iranian leader talk about before, about how we have gender issues that have to be addressed. I think that's why we're seeing photographs today of women running around Tehran without hijabs on, because I think the Iranians are going that this is an artificial problem we don't need. We can pacify a good percentage of the population if we just say no to hijabs. And he said, we're relooking how we deal with gender issues, the whole thing. He said the 12-day war, there's no more fractures. Iran has come together like it's never come together before. People were trying to take advantages of differences of opinion between the government and the supreme leader. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, for all you people out there saying, well, wait a minute, it's a theocratical dictatorship. If the supreme leader says so, it must be so. No, actually, Iran is far more complicated than that. There's got a parliament that was elected by the people. They got a constitution. There's things that happen. And the president is actually very influential and very powerful, by the way. Yes, there were differences between the president and the supreme leader. Not anymore. They are on the same sheet of music. Everybody is marching to the same tune. Anybody that thinks they're going to, take advantage of Iran and break it up needs to think again. This is why I don't think there's going to be a war. Because one thing I learned about the Israelis is they can have the worst policy in the world, and they do, but they're not stupid. They're not stupid about the world they live in. And the Israelis have deep insights into Iran, deep insights. And anybody who is intimately knowledgeable of Iran, I don't want to put you in a spot, but would you, before the 12-day war, I bet you had, I would bet a dime to a dollar that you saw fractures between the Iranian president and the leadership. And you were seeing fractures in Iranian society, a lot of criticism towards the Iranian president coming from the parliament. You saw that, I saw that, and I wasn't dismissive of it. I don't think you were either, because it's reflective of reality and it creates uncertainty. The Israelis saw the same thing, so you can't blame the Israelis into believing that if they could facilitate certain actions inside Iran, that Iran was susceptible to fracturing. But those same people, now look, Iran's been super glued together. And this is high quality super glue. It ain't going away. The Israelis know this. They aren't very good at self-deception. They do things because they are confident in outcomes. They're willing to lie about things. They're willing to commit crimes. But underneath the Israelis, at the end of the day, are realists, very much so. And I think the realists who are advising Netanyahu about Iran are telling him and telling the MSAD leaders, the MSAD is very well plugged into Iran, saying the conditions that we were hoping would manifest themselves during the 12-day war back in June, they no longer exist. In fact, if we try, it's going to backfire on us. Netanyahu says a lot of things for political reasons, for political posture statements that he made about why would he make that statement. You have to ask yourself, why would he come out in a cartoon-like manner? They got big missiles. They fly 8,000 miles. They can hit Mar-a-Lago. They're going to target you, Donnie Baby you, in Mar-a-Lago, that place down in Florida. They're going to hit you with this big missile, this big-ass missile. It was stupid. Why would he do that? They just panicked. Because the reality is they punched Iran with everything they had. Iran still stood. Imagine going to a bar looking at this guy saying, all right, I'm going to knock him out. That's how I'm going to win this fight. Just going to come up and bam, he's going down. And bam, with everything. And he turns around and goes, ouch. All right, let's go. And he starts coming after, you just gave him the best punch. You don't have a better punch. That didn't knock him out. We see support for Israel melting away. And this President Trump has invested a tremendous amount of political capital into this peace plan, a tremendous amount. And if Israel sabotages this, I think it's the end of Israel, because I think what will happen is MAGA will turn on Israel, and that's it. It's over at that point in time. And Netanyahu has to know that too. And for that reason, hesitantly optimistic that this peace plan stands a chance. Not because Trump believes in peace. Trump believes in the Nobel Peace Prize, which he's trying to posture himself to receive. But that's okay. I don't care what your motivations are. If the outcome's just and the outcome is good. But if you go back to when October 7th started, I actually wrote an article that got me under a lot of trouble. I called it the greatest military raid in modern history. And it's not a terrorist attack. It's a military raid to achieve discernible outcomes. And the outcomes were predicated on Israel being sucked into a conflict in Gaza that exposed the reality of Israel to the world. You know, the mowing, the grass, Dua doctrine was known. No one ever could have imagined that Israel would have gone to these extremes, but they did. I mean, to actually be labeled as genocidal by the world. They did this also to free Palestinians being held by Israel. That's why they took hostages as a ship to put on that table here. They had the chance of getting, 1,200, including Barati. His name's on the list. This is what they wanted. And they also wanted to create the possibility of a Palestinian state. On October 6th, nobody was talking about a Palestinian state. Nobody. Today, one of the key aspects of this peace treaty is a Palestinian state, a two-state solution. You have European nations recognizing a Palestinian state. If this ain't a Hamas victory, nothing is. Hamas was never going to be planting the flag over Jerusalem and the flag over Tel Aviv. The Knesset was not going to fall to an Hamas assault team. Hamas wins by achieving exactly what we talked about, destroying the reputation of Israel so that the world understands the brutal reality of Israel, the genocidal reality of Israel, to isolate Israel, to free the Palestinians held hostage by the Israelis, and to open the door to create the possibility of a Palestinian state inclusive of Hamas representation. So, on this third anniversary of, is it third? Yeah, third anniversary of anniversary. I think we're looking at the potential of a Hamas victory. Now, Netanyahu will never be able to admit that. Neither will Donald Trump. But people in the know, people who've been looking at this issue, I think Sinir would be happy with this outcome. I don't see the EU surviving this war. I don't see Europe surviving this as it's currently configured. Look, there's a couple things that mitigate against Europe's enormously dangerous posture today. One is that the United States doesn't want a war with Russia. I mean, Donald Trump has made it clear that this is Europe's problem. I mean, even Kelly Callas, who is just, noted for being perhaps even more dense than, Baerbock, she recognizes the United States has washed its hands of the Ukrainian conflict, and it's on us, and we can't do it. We can't do it. And one by one, you start to see Europeans wake up to the reality of what's happening here and the damage that's been done. I mean, Germany is a basket case economically. France is a basket case politically. The United Kingdom is collapsing as we speak. The idea that Europe's going to be able to drag the United States into this war is an absurdity. Even if, again, let's look at the Tomahawks. Unless something radically changes where Trump says, I'm giving them American Tomahawks with American support personnel and all. But that goes against everything he said, is that it's going to go through a NATO partner. It's not going to be American. That means the timelines are such that we're not talking reality. It's like with the ERAM missile that we talked about earlier. It's October. They've produced one prototype. That's it. Where's the 3,200? They're going to rain death and destruction down on Russia. They don't exist, and they're not going to exist for some time. And Ukraine isn't going to last that much longer. They are. Vladimir Putin mentioned in Valdai, he said, look, this war is simple. We just kill their soldiers and they can't replace their soldiers. And at some point in time, they collapse. And that's the Russian strategy, to wait this thing out politically. All Russia has to do is continue to do that, kill Ukrainian soldiers in prodigious amounts, which they're doing as we speak, and wait for it. It doesn't matter what kind of weapon systems are provided, because if there's no Ukrainians to man these systems, then it just doesn't matter. And literally, that's what Vladimir Putin said. But the other thing is, the longer we wait, the more fractured Europe becomes. I mean, there is a growing reality that many of these governments aren't going to be around this time next year. I mean, France just lost its 6th, maybe 7th prime minister in 2 years. It's non-functioning government. How long can Macron continue to stay on? At some point in time, you know, reality dictates he'll have to resign and hold snap elections for the presidency, and he'll be gone. And when he's gone, he will be replaced by somebody who will not pursue, you know, irresponsible French policies. Keir Starmer is likewise history. You know, how long can Merge hang around? I mean, the man is just saying, we're going to cut all your pensions. We're going to change life as you know it, because my government doesn't know how to make sound policies. Oh, by the way, we want you to pay billions of dollars to Ukraine for this war that can't be won. Europe, NATO can't survive. NATO doesn't have the ability to reconstitute an atrophied military system. There's not enough money in the world to do this, especially the way NATO operates. They don't have good unified procurement. They don't have, you know, the kind of training, the focus, the leadership, anything they have coasted for the past 4 decades on America, having American back them up. Today, though, what can NATO do on its own? The answer is literally nothing, absolutely nothing, and it's too expensive to fix. Look at the Germans. 100 billion euros in 19 inches, 2022, to bring the German army up to standard so it could stand up to the Russians. And last year they had to go in for more money because that 100 billion was gone, and they hadn't made the military, they hadn't made a dent. There's not enough money to fix Europe's military problems, as long as NATO is the problem. If you want to fix European military posture, European military capabilities, then the individual nation states must decouple themselves from NATO and focus on the legitimate defense requirements of that state. And that may require them to look to nations to their left and their right and do joint work together. But this concept of 30 nations working hand in glove is absurd. It's a fantasy. It's a fiction. So NATO is collapsing. When Mark Rutte became the Secretary General, I said he will be the last Secretary General of NATO. That prediction may in fact come true, because as the European Union collapses, so too does NATO, and the European Union is collapsing as we speak, that you can only buy an election. So many times we saw the European Union buy an election in Romania. We saw them buy election in Moldova, couldn't buy an election in the Czech Republic, and they're not going to buy an election in Germany or in France, or they couldn't buy the election last time in Poland. So it's over. It's game, set, match. Europe is collapsing. All Russia has to do is wake this puppy out. Well, I was at Valdo, and one thing I heard from many especially foreign generals, even Indian ones, and ambassadors, was the lack of understanding for what Russia did, what it's doing in the war. Some were questioning why they're not doing what the Americans were attempting to do in Iran, that is to launch a decapitation strike, because it seems as if Russia would be in a position to do so. Well, as you suggested, this war of attrition is very gruesome by nature, as you said, just degrading and wiping out the military of the opponent. So how do you see this? How do you explain that the Russians just continue to degrade the military of the Ukrainians and doesn't go for a decapitation strike? You know, when I was invited to Russia in August, I went there I was hosted by the National Unity Club. And the National Unity Club is affiliated with the Union State. And the Union State is a political, economic structure that brings Belarus and Russia together. But every conversation that was held through the National Uni Club, and about the Union State is they spoke of the three sisters. See, the Union State won't be whole until a third sister joins. The third sister is Ukraine. The West doesn't understand this because our mentality is we're war kill. That's what we do. I guarantee you, America, there wouldn't be a Ukrainian government. There wouldn't be a Ukraine today. We'd have blown it into the ashes. Doesn't mean we necessarily win because we always find a way to lose. But, we would have destroyed Ukraine, the Russians. Ukraine is the third sister. You don't kill your sister. Your sister's gone astray, but you want the sister to come back and rejoin the family. That's always been the goal and objective.